Okay, folks, so today, World Paranormal Research Society, you're here with Timothy and Alexandria, and we have special guest Philip Costello from Paranormal Awakenings Ireland joining us, where he's going to talk about what happened at Lackeen Castle. So we found so much more things out there that we wish we could have went into with the interview, but I guess they didn't look into those things. Alexandria will speak on that in a minute. But I want to address something because our last interview with Paranormal Awakenings Ireland, where we put up the photograph, it was an SLS picture. So Paranormal Awakenings Ireland's definitely use SLS. For us, it's not the best tool to use SLS for several reasons. If you're using a Windows version, Microsoft SLS camera, it comes with various presets that anybody can manipulate. It's actually compatible with an Xbox 360 gaming system, which is one reason why we recommend all paranormal researchers veer away from the SLS camera, just because even if you're filming live, if you have presets set, you could actually capture something that's preset into the software that'll just appear on the screen, and that really devalues the investigation. However, Paranormal Awakenings Ireland does go to some very great locations. Why they do not stick with just a infrared night vision camera, I do not know, and it's an EMF detector and an EVP recorder. I think those are the basic tools, and you capture a lot. It's very hard to dispute that evidence if you're going live. And but with the SLS system that you can add and manipulate, especially through Windows and uh, Microsoft, it just seems like it's not a very good tool, and it raises so many questions to the legitimacy of the stuff. Now, I've had conversations with PJ about this, and as I referenced in the interview, and PJ fully supports the SLS. He loves it. But for us, if you're using an infrared camera and some of the stuff that they've captured with the SLS, but if you use an infrared camera, you're going to have more depth to it, what you're capturing. Again, it's pretty much undisputed if you're going live, which they love to go live, and because you can't really preset anything into there to just pop up at a designated time frame. And so and we're not saying Paranormal Awakenings Ireland is doing this. We're not saying that at all. But we're saying that you could do that with an SLS Windows Microsoft slash type camera that has presets that you can go in and manipulate. And so people can do that. But that is not what we're saying that Paranormal Awakenings Ireland is doing. But the fact that you can do that raises a lot of questions, and it does, again, question some of the legitimacy. If people will have like raise legitimate questions, as with our last interview with Paranormal Awakenings Ireland. However, we love the photograph. We think they go to some great locations. They get definitely good EVPs. And I've just been trying to encourage them to put down that SLS camera. It's just so many ghost hunting tools out there that I don't recommend using. Certain apps that I don't recommend using, because there's certain apps that are designed, ghost hunting apps that are designed, if you're trying to capture a spirit voice, that are designed to throw a spirit voice out there at certain times without you ever presetting it. Now, that's not what SLS, it's not about EVP. I'm just giving an example of another device that will do this, which is certain apps out there that you should stay away from. If you're going to use a digital recorder, that is great. Again, white noise generators are very good for capturing voices at different frequency levels that you may not capture directly on a digital recorder. So we'd have to do a whole different show to break this down. But obviously, we like PJ, we like Philip from Paranormal Awakenings Ireland. That's why we have them on the show. And I would just like to see them stay away from the SLS cameras. I would like to see them stick with infrared, stick with EVP, stick with EMF, but I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to keep using the SLS. And that's very frustrating for us because, again, this software is very manipulative. But they go to great locations, and I think they would capture just as good of evidence out there without using an SLS camera. Now, Lackeen Castle is a very interesting location that they just did, and we'll play you some of the EVPs from there. And Alexandria has a story, and she's going to share it that Philip didn't actually mention in the interview.
Well, before I go into this story that I felt it was very interesting. I'm all about history, folklore, because that plays into various locations on what's happened in the past. And for a lot of our listeners out there that may not know what the puka is, and the puka is Irish for spirit or a ghost, and it's also Old English for goblin, and it's considered bringers of both good and bad fortune, and can help or hinder rural or marine communities. And another word that kind of jumped out to me is that these creatures are said to be shape changers. Well, we know that Native American cultures use the word shape shifter. So this is just another example of various cultures having almost the same entity but using a different word. And they said that they can take the appearance of horses, goats, cats, dogs, and hares. And they can also take on the human form. And Philip also mentioned that they're known as tricksters. We know in Norse mythology, Loki is the trickster. So another example where creatures, folklore, myths are the same entity, but they use a different name in different cultures. And the story that I found interesting was the mystery of the three heads. And this has said to puzzle scholar for many years. And there's three heads that appear in stone. And I'll read a bit of what I found out. These three fellows have puzzled scholars for many years. In wintertime, it is said that they're fully submerged, making it impossible to figure out the age of the figures. And in spring, they remain semi submerged and still keep their age a secret. But when summer comes and the sun dries up the drain in which they reside, a feature on the face of one gives a strong clue as to when they were created. And in the summer, the face on the left can be seen with a small pipe at the corner of his mouth. So despite their ancient appearance, they figure they must have been carved after the arrival of tobacco to Europe, and that was around the mid 16th century. And local folklore tells of three brave men who followed a ghost to nearby Lackeen Castle, only to have their heads torn off, turned to stone, and thrown in the ditch. Well, at least one got to keep his pipe. So that's a little bit of folklore in regards to nearby Lackeen Castle. And it seemed to be a very incredible location. There's a huge tree there. And one of the impressions that I got looking at that tree, it came to me that I seen people hanging from the tree. So it's a very old tree, and being a watchtower or a fortification, I mean, executions of prisoners, I'm sure would have happened. But that was one of the first impressions of the tree, that I seen individuals actually hanging from that particular tree. And I seen another image on the right hand corner of I couldn't quite make it out, but it seemed like it was almost it was enticing someone to go into the tree to explore the tree again. It could have been the puka, trickster trying to entice you into that particular tree.
Yeah, take a listen to the interview. He gives a lot of great information on Lackeen Castle, a lot of great history. And again, we support PJ and Philip of Paranormal Awakenings Ireland. We just don't like the SLS camera as a ghost hunting tool for legitimacy. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about the original SLS that was invented uh, for the specific reason of mapping out where a spirit may be. It's just it has evolved into more of like a gaming tool versus a legitimate paranormal camera. And so, yeah, I absolutely hate SLS, but they got some great evidence. You're going to hear the EVPs and take a listen to the interview. Here you go. Okay, folks, welcome back to World Paranormal Research Society. We have Philip with us from Paranormal Awakenings Ireland. And Philip, PJ sent me a picture not too long ago where it looked like he was in the hospital. Is he feeling okay?
Yeah, he's grand. He's just indisposed at the moment, but I'd like to take an opportunity to say hello to him. I know he will listen back onto this, and he will be back with us again for possibly another podcast again if we're doing another one.
Yeah. It's and y'all just actually did Lackeen Castle not too long ago. Can you I know y'all sent us a lot of pictures and we got some EVPs and stuff like that. Can you just explain a little bit for the folks who's never been to Lackeen Castle, a little bit background on it?
Yeah. So Lackeen Castle basically, again, it's not a castle as such. It's called castle, but it's really a tower house or a defensive position, and it's in the county of Tipperary, and it's about a 2-hour drive from where we are, an hour and a half, 2 hours. From what I know, it's between 16th and 17th century when it was constructed. And it has also got historic ties to the Kennedy family, which, of course, goes back to your own Kennedys there in the States.
Yeah.
So the castle, from what we could learn, was owned by a gentleman called Brian Buchanan Flynn. He was a chieftain of Ormond who had owned the castle, and he died approximately about 1588. Now, in his name, it basically translates as helmeted head, and that would have been given to them around the time of the Vikings. And it's said in different research scriptures and stuff that the soldiers that were in around that area at the time were meant to be the only soldiers that had worn helmets at the time. So they had been given, for the lack of a better term, the name Helmet Heads as a nickname. But they were an Anglicized family, and they were very famous around Tipperary area at the time. And the castle, or the tower house itself, a beautiful little area, was said to be fortified a little bit more around 1650, 1660, in or about that time. But unfortunately, again, it had been taken over by Cromwell's forces and English forces again because of the war at the time of the English coming over attacking the Irish.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it was a beautiful building. Surrounded, it would have been a tower house on it. Now, I should probably seen with photos that I sent you today, but just to let the listeners know that a lot of the times these floors would have been wooden floors. There wouldn't have been anything very fancy about these because it was primitive compared to what we have today. So the floors more than likely would have hay on them, you know, to keep in heat. Probably would have had the coat of arms and banners and stuff and armour and that, maybe possibly around the walls. There would have been a number of arrow slit windows, as I call them. So those narrow windows that you'd see in castles and tower houses that were designed particularly that way, as you know yourself, so that they were handy for archers to fire out of, but weren't very easy to penetrate from the outside in. But at the moment, the tower house, the main tower itself, is quite structurally, looks beautiful from the outside, but inside it's only a shell of what it used to be. But there's still a remain of a couple of stairs, and you can still get to a number of stories on the castle. And there is several remains of chimney pieces and upper level, which is very well maintained. Looked to be like a church area, or it could have been a living chambers. But no one really is quite sure of what it would have been. But again, it's a very, very beautifully kept tower house. Also, the stories with this particular location, is said that there was a very holy book known as a story found in this building when the site had been repossessed about the 18th century, and when work was being undertaken in it, an ancient manuscript or book had been hidden inside the walls. Now, this book would have been known as a story. It basically would have been a holy book that would have been written in very early Latin, maybe late 8th, early 9th century, but it would have taken very particular either bishops or people who had been able to read or write at the time to be able to translate it. Now, the book had been taken for safekeeping to a nearby monastery, which is still there today. Now, the monastery is there, the remains of the monastery is there, in a place called Laura. And it would have remained there until about this mid-16th century, and then it would have been taken away. Apparently, we believe that it was taken by a gentleman called Charles O'Connor, or also known as Charles the Don, whose grandson was a Roman Catholic priest, and then it had been moved to Dublin. But along with all this fantastic history of the building, it also has the dark history of what we had said before of a puka.
Yeah, I know that you're talking about the puka, and it seems like when I examined the photographs that you sent, well, PJ had sent me. It appears that at the top of there's an entry point there up top. I don't know what that was, but it appears to me, if you look at a drawing of a puka, it appears to resemble a close resemblance of what the drawings of pukas look like, actually. This appeared up there in some mist or something.
And the impression that I got, Philip, is that when I examined the photographs, I looked at the photograph of the tree, and to me, it had almost an enticing quality, if you know what I mean, where it's almost enticing you to come closer to the tree, and I could see something in there. Then I could see another on the bottom right hand corner, it was like something was peeking through branches on the bottom right hand corner, but it was almost like the feeling that I had when I looked at that image was almost like a Pied Piper feeling, where I right away I visualized some kind of a flute or something trying to entice people towards that tree, and it's almost, you became almost in a trance, if you know what I mean, and enticing you to go in there again with like the Pied Piper mentality in that big tree.
Yes, there is. I'm not offhand. I can't tell you the name of it, but I have heard of trickster spirits, shall we say, that can do that. Now, this particular tree that you're talking about, PJ himself had been very, very drawn to this tree, and had stated on a number of occasions how he had been drawn to it, and he couldn't take his focus away from the tree, and he couldn't quite get why or what was it that was attracting him. And he studied the picture for quite a long time. But it's very possible that there's entities that would have been in and around that area, and they are known for playing tricks. They are quite not malevolent, but very sly in a way that they can almost hypnotize a person into playing their game, if you will.
And I had one more impression about when I was looking at that tree. And I mean, I don't know anything about the area historically, but when I was looking at the tree, and then I sort of not meditating on it, but I did come to mind that there were several individuals, I couldn't make it out, that were hanging from the tree. And I mean that they were actually hung from the tree.
It's very possible. With this tower house, there would have been death holes, and it's surrounded by a defensive wall. So if there had been any type of executions or anything of that nature that had taken place in here, they would have very possibly used the tree itself.
Yeah, when I spoke to PJ about the tree, I told him he should go play in the branches. And he said, no, I wouldn't do that. But if I was there, man, I would have played in those branches, because for me, if you think something's in that tree and just looking at that photograph, you get some good indication that there was something in the tree. I would definitely want to go encounter whatever it was in that tree.
Well, the thing is, when you go to the tree itself, with your own human eye, you won't see anything. You might feel something, but it'll look like an everyday normal tree to you and me. It's only after, if you have a video running or you have a photos taken, that you can look back and you'll be able to spot them, because these are very good jack-the-lads, very good minstrels, very good at playing games, playing mind games, and tricks and jokes. And sometimes with these type of entities that can live around that environment, it's sometimes better to leave things alone instead of poking a stick at them, let's say.
Well, could you maybe tell our listeners too? I mean, I couldn't gauge by the photograph. Uh, does anybody really know how old that tree it is, and what type of variety of tree it is? Because I know it's hard to tell, but it looks like it's a really big tree that it would have been around for a very long time.
Um, Again, it'd be very, very hard to judge, but it would be a tree that possibly would have been on the land for hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, you know yourself, if trees could talk, in a lot of locations, or if surrounding things could tell you a story, I'm sure that tree could often tell you a couple of good stories about what it had witnessed in its past.
And exactly. And I think when we've spoken to you and PJ, that a lot of the locations that you have gone to, they've been fortified watchtowers. And it seems that, I mean, an indication of having a watchtower or any kind of tower like that with the arrow slits. So there would have been skirmishes, there would have been battles, there would have been deaths around there. Hence, why you would have to build a watch or a battle tower.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these were set up for Irish defences, and they wouldn't have been as well armed as maybe the English troops or Scottish troops, the Romans, what have you. They were basically, it's very basic armour, very basic armory gear. It wouldn't be like you'd see on the films with the shining knight's armour and stuff like that. It would have been a lot of tweed, Celtic looking shawls and stuff that these guys would have worn. Strapped leather sandal boots, very well trained, but very minimal armour wise. But a lot of these tower houses would have been set up as a defensive point for main areas and main castles in and around Ireland at the time. So it's basically like a defence on your football team before it gets to the goalie. And the tower houses would have been your last line of defence before getting to the main castle itself. And these guys would have known how to put up a damn well good fight. They were self-sufficient, you know.
Let me ask you this question. Let's go over the scope of the investigation. What was the time frame that y'all was there? Like, when did you start the investigation? When did you end it? And what was the overall feeling that you got? Because I know you were saying that when you were there, you couldn't actually see the things with your eyes with the tree. But what was the things that you actually sensed while you were on location?
While we were on location, we took off from Galway here just around 6 o'clock or so. We would have been there. We would have arrived there during the day or in the evening time, but again, it would have been still bright. Thank God, because we wanted to give our followers and members a view of the castle, the tower house, and explain a little bit of history behind it and what we were doing there. So it would have been around 8 o'clock in the evening by the time we had arrived on site, and we took a chance to have a look around and to take photographs, set up our equipment, and then PJ and myself done a quick live, and PJ explained about the area that we were in, about the tree itself and why he was drawn to it and what was going to take place that day.
Yeah. So what were you sensing when you were on the location there? Did you sense anything yourself? Because I know that I've been sent a couple of EVPs. Did you hear those while you were there?
No. Well, when we were there, when we had arrived at the location at the start, now you have to understand, or the listeners gotta just give them a little bit of insight that this area is now a working farm, a working field. So there would have been cattle on site. There's old Cromwellian outhouses. Also, these would have been built later on after the castles had been there. So this is still a working farm. So we had to tread carefully because we didn't want to upset on the owner or cattle or anything like that. So, doing EVPs and stuff, it's kind of hard to do it when there's natural environment, let's say. But we had a look around the area and we went up on the different floors, and you do get a slight eerie sense on the second, third, fourth floor. Now, me personally, I wasn't very comfortable. I didn't feel very well at all. While I was looking around, there was something about it that wasn't sitting right with me, but yet, personally, I wasn't getting that on my camera, and the K2 was giving little hits here and there. But when I got to the top floor, it was just something about it I didn't like. It just.
Can I ask you this question, Philip? Do y'all use? Did you use at this location? You got to excuse me that I haven't actually checked out the actual live video that y'all did or the video y'all posted yet. Even though I've seen the photographs and I've heard bits and pieces of it, I haven't seen the whole thing. But did y'all extensively use any night vision cameras, or were y'all just focused on SLS? Like, what was the equipment that you were using?
So we had a number of different bits of equipment with us. Like, we had the usual stuff. We had the cameras, normal cameras. We had the voice recorders. We had the SLS. We had body cameras. PJ has a number of night cameras as well, but we only had one set up at the time to face the tree. We also had a camcorder with a night vision light on it that we used to record going around the area as well. Unfortunately, we were having a lot of trouble with reception and stuff, so we couldn't really do a live. And when we went to go live, it was very quiet, or again, so we thought. We went to the location, things kind of went eerily quiet, and the wind picked up, let's say, out of nowhere after being such a calm night. And things just kind of made us feel like we were chasing our tails, for the lack of a better word. There's a lot of birds nesting in there as well and stuff. Now, maybe your listeners might have a suggestion on it, or even yourselves. It's not uncommon for birds to be hurting around these areas, but there seem to be just a lot of dead crows and dead birds lying around the area, and that kind of was a bit eerie.
Yeah.
Like it was a sight of some sort. Like even when we arrived, the crows. I know there's a myth behind seeing crows as well, and we'd seen a flock of crows just as we were arriving too, and it was just very, like an Albert Hitchcock's The Birds kind of a scene. When we got to the location, so all these things put together would kind of give you the creepers anyway.
Yeah.
But the initial investigation itself, as we were going around, up until the point where PJ had captured the image on the SLS camera, things were very quiet. Now, we did have a good long hit as well on the K2 when we were explaining to the listeners of what we were about to do, how we were going to record this location for the investigation, and the K2 went nuts. And we made sure to have, phones put away and everything that would have interfered with stuff kept away, so there would be no interactions, or people couldn't say, it's a mechanical thing. But as we talked about it, and we talked about the crew car, and we talked about the history of the house, the K2 was going absolutely ballistic.
Now, for the audience that is not aware of what a K2 is, can you explain that?
So, a K2 is a piece of equipment that a paranormal investigator would have. And it's basically one of my favorite tools. Has a number of lights on it, and it picks up EMF frequencies.
Yeah. And another question is, like, what, out of all the equipment that y'all were using, because I know y'all have a lot of equipment, what do you feel like you were catching the best evidence on? I know you said that your K2 was going active, but what other piece of equipment do you feel like was picking up a lot?
Again, just natural senses, and you know, as I said, the K2 for me is my favorite thing because it's like there's something there when it picks up the electronic fields and allows us to determine the presence of spirits. But PJ and myself think, you know, the SLS again came up trumps this time.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, you know, I just, a lot of people that know me know that I absolutely don't like SLS cameras for various reasons. But y'all go to a lot of awesome locations, man. Like, completely, y'all have like the best locations that y'all are visiting. And I think that, man, if y'all were to take like 4 or 5, not just infrared cameras and set them up, because what I would be curious to see is that puka, that picture what it looks like a puka in there. I would have liked to have seen that from a night vision, an infrared camera perspective, because obviously the SLS, it changes things color wise. You don't, you know, a night vision, of course, you know, really just black grays and whatever. But I would have been curious to see if we could have picked up more movement on that puka than what was captured with the SLS, you know?
Well, again, this, as you know, with the SLS camera, it's basically, it comes up, as we said before, with stickmen light figures. It's a structured light scanner that scans where you point, 3D scanning technology gadget, and simply put, if there is a spirit in the location, it will pick it up. If you're out with us on an investigation, and I pointed at you, it's going to pick you up as a stick figure as well on one end, and it will show you as a full figure on another part of it.
No, I'm aware. I'm aware that the SLS, who invented the SLS and stuff like that. I just don't like that. The only thing is, like, for me personally, I don't like the SLSs that were created by like Microsoft and Windows and stuff like that. Then, and those, for me, I just don't particularly care for them because there's a lot of problems with those for various reasons. One of them is some of them are created for video games. Some of them have presets to them where you can alter things. And so for us as paranormal researchers like you and PJ and us, if you do use a camera that's kind of controversial, it's going to raise questions, right? Like the last interview we did with y'all, and we really focused on that SLS picture. We got a lot of feedback on that and a lot of criticism, but you got to understand, I know the SLS originally, how it was invented, who invented it, and stuff like that. And I understand that. But when Windows took it, they took it to a whole different level and made it compatible with like an Xbox video game and stuff like that, and added all these presets to it and all these manipulative buttons to it. And you're right, it does pick up stick figures. But so I just completely against those. I just feel like y'all go to so much good active locations and y'all catch good EVPs, and I don't know, for the SLS I'm just not a fan of it. I know PJ loves it. Me and PJ's had conversations about this, and he completely defends the SLS. I understand that he's a big fan of it, but the problem is when you're presenting evidence, like when y'all go to a location like Lackeen Castle or any other location that you've done, and you show a SLS picture, for those people that are not aware that this is an Xbox compatible, there's a lot of people that are aware that it's Xbox compatible and it has certain presets to it, and it kind of devalues what you capture. When you capture so much good stuff, I would think to purify it and keep it with infrared. You know, that's me. PJ's never going to do that. He's always going to keep that SLS. I understand that. He loves it. But for me, I just choose not to use it. But and the perfect reason that I choose not to use it is because when you look at that puka, man, I would have liked to have seen that from a different piece of equipment. You know what I mean? Because that puka, it Are you aware of the picture I'm talking about of the puka that's at the top there, that entry point?
Yeah,
I mean, you know, I just feel like with the SLS, some of the stuff comes out flat. You know what I mean? And so
yeah.
you lose a lot of your depth and your definition with the SLS too. But you know, a lot of people use it, and there you go.
I had a question for you,
Well,
Philip. When you're talking about the puka, for a lot of our listeners that may not be aware of what the puka is, because I think the puka is mentioned, I think in Irish, if I'm not mistaken, Scottish and Welsh folklore. Is there history, or is there folklore, or is there, I guess, legend of the puka in that particular area? And I'm just curious. I'm wondering why the puka would sort of hang around there, just for our listeners that may not be aware of what a puka is.
well, a puka is, like you said, it's famous in Irish folklore. It's also famous in Scottish folklore. It's also quite famous in Indian folklore as well, but it's known as under a different name. They can be found in many different rural locations in and around Ireland, and it's basically hangs around small mountainous lakes and springs, um, around different areas of water or different buildings and stuff. And it's a mischievous Irish folklore figure. It's often told that it can take the form of an animal, maybe a rabbit or a horse or something of that nature. So it's sort of like, like on Halloween when kids dress up and they do trick or treating. A puka is said to be very good at playing tricks. Puka, basically, it's an old word for goblin. Um, if you translate it, and it's basically the reason that it would stay around Lackeen Castle would have been that, again, one of the Kennedys who had owned the castle or the tower house at the time, there was a story that went with it that he had caught a number of old hags, old ladies, trying to rob stuff off dead bodies that had been around the area. And when he went to deal with them, they called on this puka. And the story goes that the puka and the Kennedy gentleman had come to an agreement that if the Kennedy man let the girls go, that the puka would mind the Kennedys and never harm a hair on their head. So apparently it was said that this puka lives in that castle in and around the grounds of the area, and apparently had been spotted on more than one occasion. So it's basically a mischievous sort of a goblin spirit, ghost, playful thing, but it can be apparently also quite dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting because a lot of people in North America, like Canada and the United States, very rarely have they heard of the puka. Very few people have, and it's so well known, like in Ireland and other places. But you're right. I mean, a lot of people's heard of goblins, but they've never heard of like the puka like that. And actually, to be honest with you, the first time I'd ever heard of the puka is when y'all had told us that y'all were going out there, and Alexandria actually said, yeah, they're going to look for the puka. So she was aware of what it was, but I had no idea. So I had to look it up and research it. And and it's just striking to me that the picture that y'all caught resembled so much of the artist renderings of what a puka people have claimed to seen before. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ireland is full of folklore and myth and stories that would have been passed down from family to family, from father to son. You know, be it bedtime stories to fire camp stories to whatever. You know what I mean? And even to this day, these stories still go around. It's like the banshee, the puka, the fairy motor car, whatever. You know, and these are the stories that kind of still live in every culture. Every culture has their own puka. Everyone has their own myth. Like we have the puka, you have Bigfoot, whatever.
Well, you know,
So
when you're
everyone,
talking
every
about,
country has their own.
yeah, I agree. And then you're talking about how in Indian folklore, and because I know a lot of Scottish people, even Irish people, have Norse roots. A lot of the clans in Scotland have Norse roots, and it's interesting to note that in Viking mythology and all that, their trickster is called Loki, where he's a figure
Yeah,
that's a trickster. So you are absolutely correct that every culture has their own version of a puka, but just going by a different name. And it's also interesting, I think, to me that when I listened to one of the EVPs, could you sort of set the stage on? I heard the "Help Me." What
Hey,
was?
Philip, Alexandria was replaying that and replaying that and replaying that yesterday. She said, "Listen, listen, listen." So it was a very good EVP. But go ahead, Alexandria.
My question is, when this EVP occurred and you could hear the "Help Me," were you asking entities any questions, or was this just something that you heard after in the replay? And where were you really situated in the watchtower or the castle when this particular EVP occurred?
So, what we're going to do now is insert the EVP that says "Help Me." So I kind of want you to take a listen to it real quick. Listen with your own ears here.
Well, as I said, when we got there was a feeling at the start, and then as the night went on, things got very dry and very boring, very cold, very quiet, or so we thought. Um, I had two EVP machines with me. I had two voice recorders with me, and none of the devils would work for me. They wouldn't record for me. I didn't know what was going on again. So I ended up using my phone. So we were basically in the main belly of the watchtower downstairs, and we're kind of getting fed up at this point because things are very quiet, nothing's happening, and I decided to ask a number of questions, and PJ had the camcorder with him, and as I asked the questions, PJ went and had a walk around. Now we weren't aware of this EVP happening because we didn't hear it with our ears. We didn't pick it up. We weren't aware of it until PJ went back on the evidence and back on the footage that we had captured, and that's when we came across it. And again, we'd like to give a shout out to PJ Dugu for helping us out with this as well. He often gives us a lot of help with our EVPs and a lot of stuff with our videos, as we have explained before. He's fantastic, brilliant at picking up stuff that we wouldn't normally be able to pick up on. But it's as clear as the day is long when you play back the EVP. But again, we weren't aware of it until we went back to listening and watching all the footage and everything as well. So that was a very, very good capture between that and the picture of the entity in around the stairway at the top of the top of the tower house.
Yeah, and I had another question for you too, that a lot of our listeners may have the same questions, and I know especially in Scotland, Britain, and Ireland, there's. Do you ever maybe do research on the locations that you're going to be doing with, magnetic fields or ley lines? Because I know in Europe there's a lot of ley lines where people use dowsing rods, and meaning that, there's a lot of running water under particular locations, or a lot of standing stones are set up on various ley lines that, are thousands and thousands of years old.
It's a good point, actually, but no, it's not something that we'd um, actually think of doing. We're basically, when we look at a location, we look at the history of it, we look at the history behind it, what's the significance of the area, who lived there, what happened there, to see if, when we do go there, who to look for, what questions to ask, stuff like that.
Yeah, because you mentioned about the birds and stuff. There's a lot of birds, because I know in a lot of different cultures, uh, dead birds laying about and all that are a sign that, the place is really saturated with a lot of negative energy, or there's been a lot of blood soaked into the ground. So dead birds, it's almost like the ground there, is, we've said before, is spoilt, or it's just the ground that is not conducive because there's been a lot of tragedy, if there's been a lot of warfare, a lot of horrific events in history. And two, like you said, especially in Europe and stuff, a lot of buildings were built on top of previous buildings that could be thousands of years old, and there's a lot of residual energy even in the particular of the ground, and animals can sense this, and hence why there could be a lot of dead birds and a lot of activity in that way.
Well, of course. I mean, like I said, there's a number of different areas in this place. You have obviously the structure itself, and then you have the outhouses around it, which would have been from William times. But these places would have been picked for a reason. And personally, what I like to kind of think of when I'm walking around these type of locations is, what I can see now is not what they would have seen back then. So they wouldn't have had the walls and the houses and the telephone poles or whatever back in them days. They would have seen the outlay of the land completely different. So a lot of these, I think you'd agree, are all built on hills for defensive reasons. So why these are placed in certain areas, what was there beforehand, there had to have been a reason for that.
Yeah. And
a lot of these have their own little cells and like again, murder holes, places where they would have kept people, whether it was people that would have been trying to steal from the land, or just enemies that they would have had around at the time. Of course, there would have been fights there, and like any household, there's going to be deaths and there's going to be celebrations. There's going to be every sort of thing. So, of course, there's going to be bloodshed, and there's going to be sort of a dark side to these things as well.
To describe the opening there where the puka was discovered, what did that area up there used to be? Because there's so many different points of that castle that's very unrecognizable, I should say, like as to what used to be the function of the area. So if you look at where that puka is kind of going up into that opening there, do you know what that used to be up there?
Well, it's very hard to tell because again, there's no ground plans of what it used to be. There's no sketches. There's no records I personally can find. But again, there would have been kitchens. There would have been small rooms. There would have been the stairway areas. So up around that area, it could have been a bedroom. It could have been a living quarters. It could have been a storage area for for their grain, for their clothes, for whatever they had at the time, you know. So a lot of these places wouldn't have had too much in them. A lot of them would have been rooms, storage areas for food, kitchens, places to keep their cattle and their chickens and whatever else they would have had around at the time. So it's very likely that up on that floor would have been maybe bedrooms and personal chamber areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, it's really interesting to note. Like I said, I myself, going back to that tree, there's more to that tree than meets the naked eye. That's all I can say. There's more going on in that particular tree, and like I said previously, I see people hanging from that tree, and like you said, if the tree could talk, man, that would all the histories. And I had another question that may be sort of off topic or whatever. A lot of these places, it would be interesting too that I don't know if the owners of these particular properties, if because in Canada, America, and different countries, metal detectors are a huge thing where you can find various artifacts and different things from different fortifications and all that. I don't know if any particular artifacts were found or anything at that particular location that were on record.
Again, the only thing that would have been found that we've seen on record would have been the Holy Book. It's the only thing that basically had been talked about. But I'm sure, like this is a location that would be owned by the council and by the Heritage Board, which look after these places. And they would have obviously had a team sent in to check the structure, to check the location, to do. They would have had their own historical team head in and look for stuff. But a lot of times, it's not publicized. It's not like, oh, we found coins here, we found bodies there, we found this, that, and the other. It's all very done privately, let's say. And if there is anything found, it's always sent to a museum in Dublin or maybe across the pond or anything like that, you know.
Well, now when you
I'm
talk
sure
about
there has been many stuff found.
when you talk about the Holy Book, are you the Holy Book for what faith or what religion are you referring to?
Again, it would have been a book that had been kept at the castle. Again, it would have been written in Latin. A lot of the time back in those times, it would have been mainly Latin and Gaelic.
But was it like for the
old,
what religious faith was it attached to you? Do you know?
I'd assume it would have been Catholic. It would have been mainly Catholic.
Okay.
And it would have been an old story manuscript, let's say, with basically stories from 1300s onwards. So all monks from the nearby abbey and stuff, maybe that would have been had hidden it there.
Yeah.
That would have had maybe studied it or read it. Maybe it was hidden there long time ago because of a raid that might have happened. Maybe it was hidden from Vikings. God only knows.
And where's that book at today?
It's said that it's kept in the National Museum of Ireland, which is in Dublin at this moment of time, which is fantastic because a lot of these things go missing. But there's a number of artifacts that have been found in different locations around Ireland that are placed in many museums. But our National Monument of Ireland is one of the biggest museums in Ireland, I believe.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I think we got a pretty good show here. Is there anything else about the location that you would like to say that we may have skipped over or left out?
No, just that the two main features were that
Okay.
prominent figure that was caught of the SLS. Again, it didn't come up as a stick figure. You can clearly see with the picture that dark figure in the stairway.
Right.
Now, was it the puka? Was it an old resident?
Right.
We don't know. Who asked for help? Why were they asking for help? Was it a prisoner? Was it a soldier that died? Was it one of the family members? Why were they asking for help there? We don't know.
Exactly.
And these two elements of the investigation are very interesting to us. Like, who was watching us? Why were they up in that look? Why did they appear to us at that particular time? Did they want us to know they were there? Did they want us to intimidate us, or did they want us to just know that, hey, I'm watching? You know, is it something? Was it the puka that's keeping maybe a spirit there? Is that why the spirit is asking for help? We don't know.
Exactly. That's, and like I said, that EVP of help me was clear as day. There's just no way that you could mistake that. And you know, with it being a tower house fortification and all this, you know, there's no really telling who it was that was asking for help.
Exactly. I mean, we didn't catch it on the regular EVP sessions, let's say, because it would have been brilliant to being able to listen back and go, oh, we heard that, and dial more into it. Unfortunately, it's only after we got back home and we went looking through the evidence and stuff that we came across it. You know, so unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to explore further on that spirit. If it was a spirit, again, it could be Napuka playing a trick.
Yeah.
We don't know, but it's very, very clear the two bits of evidence: the figure on the stairway caught by the SLS and that EVP.
Yeah.
And those figures that PJ got in the tree as well. So there is definitely something around that area.
Okay, well, hey, man, that's we appreciate you joining the show today, and
All the best to
I said
PJ.
I talked with him today, so yeah, he said his apologies, but
no, we hope
unfortunately people get sick, and you know, so
yeah, we hope he feels better soon for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as this man.
Well, all right, man. You have a good rest of your night, and we really appreciate you joining the show.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
You too. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much. Bye.